Hello and welcome to my home in the kitchen today, again, as usual. And today I'm going to show you how to bake something that you guys went nuts for when I put a picture of it on Instagram. I put this picture up and within 24 hours it had like 10,000 likes. Da, 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 da. Birthday cake batter macarons, which look really exciting. I've done macarons before a couple of times. I did a really in-depth masterclass with my good friend Dane, who is a member of the Crumbs Doilies team, and he is the macaron whiz, and he basically refreshed my dusty old macaron expertise, which I hadn't been using for a while, and gave us a really in-depth tutorial basically. So if you want to really get down to the nitty-gritty of macarons and how they work, please go and watch that video because it is really good and Dane is an absolute star. So I'm going to start by making my paste. I've actually already prepared my almonds and icing sugar. I've got 105 grams of icing sugar and 190 grams of ground almonds, which I have whizzed up in a food processor until it's quite fine. This is really important because a lot of sort of supermarket store-bought ground almonds aren't quite fine enough. They're quite lumpy, and what you'll end up with is not a very smooth batter and a lumpy top, which nobody wants. So that's why I did put it through a food processor, and also to help it mix with the icing sugar. So I've got my almonds and icing sugar here. I'm going to add half of my eggs. Now, if you remember from my macaron video, I use 144 grams of egg whites, which I split into two lots of 72 grams. It is very specific, and this is a good point to mention. This is precisely why I only ever use electronic scales. One of the most regularly asked questions I get on all of my videos, all of them, every single one, is can you convert this into American? Can you convert this into cups? No, I can't. This is really important, guys. For baking like this, for very fine baking, it is super important to get the exact measurements right, and you just can't do that with cups. So for that reason, I'm sorry, but I can't convert this, and I will never be converting my recipes into cups. I'm really sorry if that is annoying for people, but you can Google these things, but the main thing is you can also get electronic scales pretty inexpensively. They're about 20 quid. So there you go. So I've got my 72 grams of egg whites, and that's just gonna go straight into this bowl here with all my almonds and sugar, and I'm just going to mix that together to form a kind of thick paste. So what I've got here is a very stiff paste. Don't know if you can see that. And that will, because of the icing sugar, that will dry out quite quickly, and that's not what we want. So I'm gonna cover it in cling film. And I'm just going to leave that to one side until the time that we need it. And I don't know, maybe something scientific happens in that time, maybe it relaxes. I really don't know, maybe you can tell me. There are a lot of experts out there who are much more experty than me. So that's going there. Now I'm also going to start making my sugar syrup in a pan. We're using an Italian meringue method. There's various different meringues and this is my favourite, it's Italian. And so I've got 190 grams of caster sugar, and also I'm just going to drizzle over 60 grams of water. 60 grams is also 60 millilitres, in case you're wondering. It's really making use of those scales, guys. And once that's all in, take it over to the hob and put it over a medium heat and get things going. Now, what I'm looking for is for this mixture to first of all get up to 110 degrees C, at which point I'm going to get my other set of egg whites on to whisk, and then keep this going and get it up to 118 degrees. Any more than that and you're gonna have really chewy, horrible macarons. Alright, so my egg whites are looking nice and frothy. This stuff is 118 degrees C, so I'm going to very carefully pour it into my mixing bowl. I'm going to try and get it down the side of the bowl rather than on the whisk, so that it doesn't like just flip it all about. And give minimal mess. It's all in. So now I'm just going to leave that whisking until it reaches room temperature, completely room temperature, completely cool to the touch, pretty hot right now. So that'll take about now 5 to 8 minutes depending on your mixer. So, see you in a sec. Okay, this is pretty cool now. So I'm going to start adding it to my paste, which I made earlier. Get rid of that. Retrieve this. And as normal, with things like this, you want to start off with a small amount just to loosen it up when it's a very stiff mixture, because then you're going to fold it in and you want to be very careful. So if you're going to try and fold that in at this point, all of this mixture, it's going to be really difficult to do it without just pounding it. Incidentally, this is what your meringue should look like. Pretty stiff with a little curve at the top. Okay. So just start off with a small blob about this big in the paste, and you can be quite vigorous at this point, just to really get it mixed through. So with your paste loosened up a little bit, you can then put in the rest of your meringue. This is where you want to fold it in. Just gently fold it over again and again, cutting through every now and then. And we are at ribbon stage. See how it pours off rather than plops? And the mixture kind of settles back in. So now it's time to put it into a piping bag. And I've got my piping bag here. I've got a small round nozzle in there, but I bent it up on itself and put it into a glass so that when I pour it in, it doesn't all just gush out, because this is quite liquidy and it will just fall out the hole. And we're in. So this just needs to be turned the right way around. I've also got my baking sheets. I've actually used Silpats here rather than baking paper, but baking paper is just as fine. And I put my templates underneath. You can just about see them. So now is the time for piping, and I find this really difficult, so please don't worry if you don't get it right first time. I'm still doing it wrong. I find it mostly difficult to get them all the same size, even with the templates actually, because you know, you kind of put the different amount of pressure on from one to the next. So, you know, practice makes perfect. I am rusty. I don't make these as much as I used to, so for that reason I just forgive myself if they're not all completely perfect. Oh, I can't get it out. Oh, there he is. Woo. Okay, so I've got it all in my piping bag, and now very carefully and quickly and assuredly I'm going to pipe these onto my baking sheets. So now that I've done my piping, I need to give these guys a really violent bang, just to give them a chance to let air bubbles rise to the surface. So now I'm just going to decorate these with a little birthday cake charm, just by sprinkling on some hundreds and thousands or millions. Any kind of sprinkles will do really. And do it now while they're still wet so that it all sticks on nicely. And now, because I want to allow these to dry out a little bit so that they can get those distinctive feet that macarons get, I'm going to leave these for about, well, it could be anywhere between 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on the climate you're in, depending on whether you've got air conditioning. But what I'm looking for is for, to be able to sort of just touch them or brush my finger over the top of them and for them to be dry to the touch. Now it is time to make the filling, and this is where the birthday cake batter comes in. You're probably wondering all this time while I've been making the macarons, where is the birthday cake batter in this picture? Well, it's inside, and for this one I'm basically basing it on my regular buttercream recipe, but I've just jiggled a few things around to give it that real classic like raw cake batter flavour, which some of you don't like, but most of you love, like me. So what I've got is my soft butter, which as per usual, I am going to start by beating for about 5 minutes, maybe even 10, just to get it really nice and pale. I've got 150 grams, and as usual, it is super duper soft, a nice sort of spreadable consistency. That's been going for a few minutes now, it's lovely and pale, so I'm now going to add the icing sugar, but as well as icing sugar, I'm adding some plain flour just to give it that kind of doughy flavour, a little bit of caster sugar just to give it a bit more texture, kind of like raw batter, and a pinch of salt just to bring it the flavour out, and also batter's quite often salty. I have 290 grams of icing sugar, which I've already sifted. I'm going to put that in, I'm going to put half of it in now. So that's 40 grams of plain flour, 10 grams of caster sugar, and a good old pinch of salt. Right, this is looking really good, but I now need to add my liquid, and normally, as you will know, I would add milk at this point, just regular old milk, but today I'm going to use evaporated milk. You can just use milk, but I think that evaporated milk gives it a really kind of rich, battery flavour, because it is like super duper intense milk flavour, and I think that works really well with the kind of cake batter vibe. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons. I may need some extra as I go, but I'm just going to mix it a little bit first. I'm also going to add a good teaspoon of vanilla extract, because obviously this is very, very important in the flavour of a cake. So in we go. And then I'm going to give that a good beat for another couple of minutes. Oh, that looks pretty nice, and it's a nice kind of very pale yellowy colour. Now this isn't completely finished. I am going to add some really colourful sprinkles, but I'm not going to add those until I'm ready to use it, otherwise sometimes the colour can kind of leach out of them. So for now I'm just going to scrape all the buttercream off my paddle, whack some cling film over the top, and leave it to one side and get on with baking my dry macarons. My macarons have dried out and they are not sticky to the touch anymore, which is perfectly right. So now I'm going to bake these at 165 degrees C for 12 to 14 minutes. I will check them at 12. The way to check that they're ready is to give them a little nudge, and if the top comes away from the feet, then they need to just stay in there for a couple more seconds or a minute, but just don't forget about them. Make sure you set a timer. My macarons have come out of the oven and cooled down, so it's time to fill them, and obviously we have our lovely cake batter filling, but I am going to add some sprinkles to it to make it even more birthday-y. Now I've waited until now to do that, because if I added them earlier and let it sit around for a while, the colour would have come off the sprinkles and the sprinkles would have softened a little bit, and I kind of want to minimise that from happening so that when I pipe them out they're really crisp and bright. So I've got my buttercream here, and I'm just going to start by adding 2 tablespoons of sprinkles, giving it a stir, and I don't know, add more if you feel like more, less if you feel like less. And when you're satisfied with the amount of sprinkles that's in your buttercream, you then need to put it into a piping bag, and I'm going to be using a really nice multiple star nozzle. It's got about 20 points in there, and it's really nice, and this is going to create a really nice shape within my macaron, so let's get it in there. As well as this, I also have a little piping bag here with some jam in it. I've used cherry jam because that's all I had. I would have preferred raspberry jam, but my boyfriend ate it all. Give yourself some jam. So once we've got all the buttercream into the piping bag, make sure it's not blocked in any way. And now you can start filling your macarons. So I've already paired up my perfect macaron pairs. It's a good idea to do that, otherwise you might end up with one base that's a bit big and the top that's a bit small. There's usually little kind of twinsies in there that you can kind of pair up. And now I'm going to set about filling them. And there they are, all finished and looking pretty spectacular, if I might say so. Now, Dane, my trusty macaron compadre, would tell me and you that you really ought to put these in the fridge overnight. A lot of recipes will also say just put them in the fridge for an hour, and the main reason is because if you're using buttercream or ganache and you try and bite into it now, that's just gonna kind of go and smush all out the sides. But also they do kind of mature in a kind of weird way. The inside gets a little bit firmer and the outside gets a bit more kind of chewy, which is exactly what you want from a macaron if you ask me. So I am gonna have to have a little nibble on these at the end, but I will be putting these into the fridge and enjoying them tomorrow with my friends and fam. And I really do hope you give this recipe a go. It's a good one, and they look spectacular and they really taste delicious as well. So please do that and let me know how you get on in the comments box below, and also by hashtagging Cupcake Jemma on Instagram so that I can check out your work. And I will see you next week. In the meantime, don't forget to head over to my website where you can check out my fabulous merch. My tea towels, my marvellous tea towels, which I often use. This is well worn now and it's still bright as ever. So head over to cupcakejemma.com to snag yourself a real treat, and I'll be back next week with another recipe. So I'll see you then. Bye.